Welcome everyone to Florida International University's Jain Studies Program. Today we are beginning our annual award ceremony and keynote address. And with that, we will begin with two videos that highlight the FIU program and also our college, the School of International Public Affairs at Florida International University.
The environment the students are facing today is unlike ever before.
It's all about team-based work in the 21st century of careers.
Being able to do teamwork and compromise on their positions and play the role of different sectors, the public, the private, the nonprofit sector, with different strategic priorities and being able to combine them all and superpose them into an initiative that truly adds value to all the organizations and the actors involved.
The way that we communicate has changed.
More and more we're bringing in professionals who have a skill set that combines with the academic expertise of other faculty members that really make a difference.
I want to be able to remove the fourth wall between the classroom and the world around us.
The different experiences that the faculty and the masters has were fundamental to really understand what I needed and to gain these different points of view to become a better professional.
One of the most important dimensions, and it's really the crowning achievement of the program, is the capstones.
Capstones, for me, as somebody who comes to this work in international affairs as a practitioner, I think is one of the best parts of the program.
The value of what they did in the classroom is manifest in this particular capstone project.
It allows them to take everything that they've learned in our program up until that moment and practically apply it.
It allowed me to develop and create innovative solutions for the corporation I work with. It was an opportunity to understand how corporations really integrate corporate responsibility into business operations.
Students are working directly with the policymaker.
Really prepare me with the tools and skills needed to succeed at my former position at Citigroup as a problem manager for Latin America, and currently here at Rocco Collins as the senior specialist in gold trade compliance.
If they want to pursue studies or careers in international affairs of one sort or another, whether in the government or in the private sector or in the think tank world or in academia, the FIU's MAGA program, the Green Schools MAGA program, really is a terrific way to get started.
To the person that is considering the Masters of Global Affairs here at FIU, I recommend it because it is a program that is tailored to the needs of the global market.
Extending to the end like an elbow, fingers getting stuck to the money, Velcro. Will I ever well known to OG like a pair of shell toes? Never mad, just motivated. We going places, and life is a game, so it comes with stages. We only trading money, we not trading places. Benji Franklin's is my favorite, only face I'm ever saving. Working hard for that #1 spot. No, we can never be stopped. I work. Stay over dedicate. I work. Gotta be the great. I work. All it takes is patience. I work. I work. I work. I work. Stop.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Let's work. How you get a whip so clean? I work. Why you get to buy nice things? I work. Why you don't live like me? I work. I work. I work. I work. Let's work.
All right, wonderful. Well, again, I wanted to welcome you all to the first annual FIU Jain Studies ceremony here virtually in Miami. We're honored to welcome you to Florida International University, which is also home to the first Jain Studies Endowment in the United States. We're happy that you're able to join us today from across the world on this wonderful platform of Zoom. We're happy to have some of the original endowers of the FIU Jain Studies Program here with us today, Professor Deepak Jain, Sapan and Gitika, Bafna, Dr. Nirmal Baid, Rajiv and Latika Jain, as well as Samani Ji, Chaitanya Pragya, who's been a wonderful supporter of the program since its inception. The purpose of today's inaugural FIU Jain Studies ceremony is to highlight cutting-edge research developed through the program and our academic connections between universities and research centers worldwide and Florida International University. It's meant to highlight the year's accomplishments and connect with the Jain community as we further develop the Jain Studies Institute, focusing on applied Jain ethics here at FIU. So to begin with, I will turn over the program to Simon Chaitanya Pragya. We'll start our program with a short benediction.
Om Ring Namo Arhantanam. Om Ring Namo Siddhanam. Om Ring Namo Ayariyanam. Om Ring Namo Vachayanam. Om Ring Namo Loi Savvasamunam. Eso Panchanamukkharo Sarvabhavapanasano Mangalanam cha Sabvesim Paramam Bhavai.
Thank you so much, Samaniji. Just so those of you who don't know, this was the Namakar mantra for the Jain tradition, and it's a tradition that makes obeisance and humble sort of the humility at the worshipful feet of the arhats, the ones whose souls are perfected, to the siddhas, those who perfect souls in nirvana, to the acharyas, to the masters, and also to the adepts and all of the ascetics as well. So this is a very famous and very, very important tradition among the Jains. So thank you so much, Samaniji, for the Namakar mantra. So we'll move now to highlighting the sort of giving you an overview of the accomplishments of the Jain Studies endowments over the past decade. So as I had said previously, the FIU program was an initial program that became the pattern for more than 15 or so endowments across the United States and ever-growing number of educational endowments. And so I kind of wanted to, we have a short video that will kind of highlight our program, what we've accomplished, and our hopes as we develop the next decade of Jain Studies at FIU.
FIU's Jain Studies Program is the first endowed Jain Studies academic program in North America. For a decade, the university has worked with the Jain community to contribute to the understanding of this remarkable faith tradition and civilization.
To me, when we look into Jainism, we create Center for Jain Studies. We need to bring to the world what drives success, what drives a peaceful life, what brings happiness.
The Jain community feels very comfortable with the university. They say university is very much organic part of the community. Even if you're a Jain or a Muslim or whatever, for the local community, they know that they can reach out to the university. That the university has done.
My experience here as a researcher and also like as a member of the Jain community has completely changed my view of seeing Jainism. Like earlier, I used to see it more as like a ritualistic religion, but here now I can envisage it as more like scientific.
FIU enjoys a close connection to the Jain community, particularly the Jain Education and Research Foundation, JERF.
We want to put the FIU in the world map, saying that this is the first professorship started in FIU, and it created a significant impact in the local community, in Florida itself, and then globally, worldwide.
When non-Jains look at the Jain ideas and come and tell us about it, we learn a little bit more about ourselves. And that's the idea, is that it's not just about sharing, but it's about also us growing with the time, around the values that we value so much.
It is not about the religion, it's not about conversion. I think what we want is just an opportunity to present our age-old pearls and wisdoms of Jainism. Yeah, and I really feel that FIU Jain Studies is the right partner, is the right step for us.
FIU has created new courses that can be taught anywhere in Florida, including the first introduction to Jainism. The university offers certifications and concentrations in Jainism for undergrad, graduate, and beginning this year, a dual religious studies global and socio-cultural studies doctorate.
Even if you don't become a practicing religious person, you should at least understand the values, which is non-violence, tolerance for other, and non-attachment to all the material things, right? The vegetarian lifestyle.
I was just being taught that, okay, you should do this, you should do that, but I never knew like what was the reason behind it, like why we should do it. So I think imparting knowledge and values about the tradition in the right way, and also like through an academic perspective, that's the best that we can do to promote our religion. So I want to serve as a professor and contribute to the society.
Once I found out what Jainism was, I was like super interested in learning about it, because I've been vegetarian since I was like 8 years old, and it was a personal decision of mine when I was younger. I mean, ahimsa is the #1 principle in the religion, so I really respected that, and I wanted to learn more.
Each year, the program hosts 2 major lectures that highlight both cutting-edge academic research in the study of Jainism and community activism through the Mahavir Jayanti and Mahavir Nirvan lectures.
The Mahavir Nirvan lectures, they were very helpful because it gave an experience of first-hand experience again of engaging with Jain community as well as the Jain scholars from different universities.
Students and professors are encouraged to do research with the Jain Vishva Bharati Institute in India and the International Summer School in Jain Studies. Each year, FIU hosts 2 Jain nuns, Samanis, who teach courses and provide extracurricular opportunities on Jainism, such as Praksha meditation.
So in my class, I find almost 75 to 100 students every year, and I find that all are very receptive by learning all these great principles of Indian culture, Asian culture, and also Jain culture. And they are finding that this is the religion which should be taught in every university.
Along with this growth of FIU's programs was the expansion of our model to many other universities in North America. And not 2 months goes by that I don't read about some other university establishing a postdoc program, a professorship, an assistantship, whatever it is, in Jain studies at their university, bringing people very knowledgeable about Jainism to their universities.
A new Center for Jain Studies at FIU would further introduce Jain ethics and virtues to the world by encouraging interdisciplinary research and connecting scholars, policymakers, and activists worldwide.
If you ask me what I would like for my next 10 years is how we think of a research-driven center. And by research, I mean we would like to research and see more similarities across different religious beliefs, different religious groups, and try to share what we stand for. And one way to share is through publications.
So I think our original goal has been fulfilled. I mean, beyond our wildest dreams, it's been done. So the next thing, as you said, is to make this the biggest Jain center. But why do we make it Jain center? So that we can bring Jainism or Jain values to common Americans and communicate to them in a way that they understand.
All right. Well, I hope that gives you a better sense of the FIU Jain Studies Program. And with that, I would like to introduce Professor Eric Larson, who is the chair of the Department of Religious Studies and the program within which Jain Studies falls at FIU. So Professor Larson, again, has been the chair of the department for now 3 terms at FIU in the School of International Public Affairs. His interest is in the interaction between religion, language, and culture. His academic work focuses on the way that Greek culture influenced the Near East after the conquest of Alexander the Great, related to the question of how Judaism and Christianity made their impact on the Greco-Roman world. He completed his doctorate at NYU, New York University, focusing on the Dead Sea Scrolls. His work has appeared in the official publication series, Discoveries in the Judean Desert, published by Oxford University Press. He has written a study on the Book of Enoch, one of the important Jewish apocalyptic works. And his work examines Aramaic manuscripts of Enoch that were found at Qumran, and seeing how those works were translated into Greek. At FIU, he teaches a variety of classes, including Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, biblical archaeology, Dead Sea Scrolls, the New Testament, early Christian history, Islam and world religions. He also teaches various language courses such as Biblical Hebrew, New Testament Greek, and Classical Arabic. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Professor Eric Larson for a brief welcome.
Hello, everyone. Whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening where you are, we welcome you to this program. I'm so happy to be here with you this morning. And on behalf of Dean Stack of the School of International and Public Affairs and myself representing the Department of Religious Studies, we would like to welcome you to the event this morning. As you saw in the video, we've been working now with the Jain community for more than a decade. And really, it's been one of the most fruitful partnerships that we've ever seen at FIU. As soon as you mention Jain Studies in the administration, you know, people smile and their eyes light up. I can tell you that we work with many donors from, you know, different traditions and not all in religious studies, but, you know, all different kinds of fields. But everybody from the top to the bottom of the administration would say that we love working with the Jain community and with the Jain Education and Research Foundation. It's just been such a joy. I know that Professor Furton, our provost at the university, he has really enjoyed his connections, and President Rosenberg as well. And they both send their greetings for this program also. In our School of International and Public Affairs, of which the Department of Religious Studies is a part, we really have it as a mission, not only to, as President Rosenberg says, to be creators of knowledge, but also to be a problem-solving institution. We want to better the community by providing resources, and sometimes that's in the form of education, sometimes in the form of ideas that we can apply that we face in South Florida, and more generally in the United States and around the world. And this is why working with the Jain community has been so incredible, because truly it's a faith that emphasizes respect and tolerance and treating others in the proper way. We have a motto in the Green School of creating a more just and peaceful and prosperous world. Of course, you can't have a just society unless you have just individuals. And the Jain tradition exactly focuses on this to help people to be better adjusted, to be more self-aware, to be less self-centered, and to strive to understand other people from where they're coming from. So because of all these reasons, we truly feel happy and blessed as we look back over 10 very fruitful years. I can tell you that in our introductory courses, Studies in World Religions, we also have a course that's part of FIU's core curriculum called Introduction to Religion, that every professor in our department makes mention of Jainism and its principles. And we have over 1,000 students every year who take these courses, and they learn valuable lessons about how they can live better lives. And so much of it is because of our study of Jainism. Not to mention our two Samanis who teach and have been a blessing in our department as well. So I know in my classes, right, I'll often mention when I'm teaching Jainism in my world religions class, oh, we have two Samani nuns, and they all know right away, oh yes, the women who have the white robes, we always wondered who they were, or we see them and they're so nice. But it's, it's just immediate recognition. In addition to the majors in our department who study Jainism in a serious way, and a couple of them that you'll learn more about this morning. But it's been a wonderful partnership, and one that we hope will continue for many, many years to come. So it's a great pleasure to be here this morning with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Larson. I appreciate those kind words. One of the things that's important for us in terms of thinking about Jainism and the study of Jainism is also trying to support and connect to cutting edge research that's happening within the field of Jain studies, and to connect with prominent scholars and thinkers about the Jain tradition, those who research the past or those who have innovative ideas of how to apply Jainism and Jain ethics for the problems of today and for the future. And with that, we are extremely honored to have our keynote speaker joining us from Delhi University, Professor Shalin Jain, whose keynote address today is entitled Literary Representations and Jain Identities in Early Modern South Asia. So Professor Shalin Jain is a professor of history at Delhi University, and he is a historian of medieval Indian history in early modern South Asia. His research and teaching interests include social history of the Jains, religious thought and practices, gender and society, identity formation, environment and society, popular culture, and resistance. His recent monograph, Identity, Community, and State, The Jains Under the Mughals, have been published from Primus Books, and Professor Jain has published several research papers in journals such as the Indian Historical Review, Studies in History, Social Scientists, etc. He's a two-time winner of the Professor J.S. Grewal Award for Best Research Paper in Medieval Indian History by the Indian History Congress in 2004 and 2013. Professor Shalin Jain has been a recipient of the UGC Raman Fellowship Award for Postdoctoral Research in the US, and was awarded an honorary fellowship at the South Asian Studies Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2013. He's received travel grants and has been recognized by the International Institute of Social History in Amsterdam, the German Research Foundation in Bonn, and has also been a fellow of the Claremont School of Theology in California. So he's an eminent scholar, does cutting edge research, and we are very honored to have Professor Shalin Jain today to talk to us about medieval Indian history and the role of the Jains. Professor Jain.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akhtar. Indeed, it's a matter of great honor for me to get to extend this invitation. Well, I am thankful to the organizers and Florida International University for giving me this prestigious platform. And with my humble knowledge, this public lecture is basically an attempt to justify this opportunity. See, this lecture intends to explore the medieval textual tradition to situate the Jains' own sense of history and the ways in which the empirical historical sense has shaped the Jain self-identity in early modern period in South Asia. Here, I want to raise certain questions as well as possibilities of further research in genealogy. How identities relate to the structure of the community and to its network of patronage is critical to understand how identities gain meaning via literary representations. The process of identity formation can be traced, of course, in the literary years to understand the group identity in early modern South Asia. Indian as well as Western scholarships on genealogy has studied Jain literary sources available in Upram, Prakrit, and Sanskrit sources. The role of the production of the literature in the formation of the Jain community has not been adequately emphasized by by scholars other than say case of Mahopadhyay Vinay Sagar in the case of Khatargach and Paul Dundas in case of the Tapagach. Paul Dundas has basically analyzed the many ways that the Tapagach literary activity was clearly modeled on the pan-Indian cultural phenomena of the royal court, in which a king vied for prestige and power by inviting scholars, giving them lavish patronage in order to demonstrate his superiority to the rival kings. For the Persian sources, the events related to the Jain community were not more than a minor scratch in the Persian or the central authority narratives. Even then, if one connects ideas and events mentioned in the Jain, Persian, and other secular literature, an engaging process is yet to come out. So far, the focus has been limited only to the analysis of the Jains with the Mughal emperors, or they have been limited only to the field of pure genealogy. Here, the need for a detailed study concerning the layered literary representations and different textual positions of the community vis-a-vis the Mughals is justified. The idea is to complicate the conventional understanding of Jainism as a homogeneous universal religion called Jainism in the contested spaces of early modernity with reference to Sanskrit Jain in particular and Jain sources in general. During the medieval period, the corpus of the Jain literature and knowledge had increased manifold, yet in spite of all the textual pretensions and the religious guidelines, whether religious communities might be or should be treated and could function as monolithic block per se, or the empirical realities of the day-to-day existence, the social dialogues, and the materialistic stakes, they're bound to reflect in the varied traditions and dissents within the religious community is a considerable problem. Sanskrit texts are valuable evidences of the extent and the importance of the Jain medieval literary culture, in which the hundred of Jain ascetics, along with their patrons, were enthusiastic participants. The practice of a senior teacher writing a short root text on which a disciple then composed an extensive commentary has long been common in the Jain literary circles. It was not so that the idea of community was a static notion for the Jains. Rather, Jain tradition was historically situated and historically constituted with profound sense of self-identification. Some biographical writing on the Jain ascetics like Hir Saubhagya Mahakav, Jagat Guru Kavyam, Bhanu Chandra Gani Charitra, though normative, are highly eulogistic, justifying the religious specialists and the friends. Yet they throw light on the lifestyle of the legends, the status of the women, the use of the wealth, and the religious skills that existed within the medieval Jain society. Another issue is of locating the Jain narratives within the self-perception of the community vis-a-vis their perception about the others in the duality of the literary narration as well as the empirical reality. How far one could situate the textual interactions only at the level of the assertion of identity formation and polemics. In such processes of articulation, Jain aesthetics delineated the Jain tradition on sectarian, local, and supra-regional levels. Jains have been divided between two principal sects ancient time. The Shwetambars with marked presence in northwestern India and the Digambars with a substantial part in South India as well as northern part of India. Within the Shwetambar textual traditions, monks were further divided into mendicant orders or subsects known as the Gachas, which competed for patronage and gaining the lay followers. Yet the Shwetambar authors of these narrative texts recognized not only the rival Shwetambars but also the Digambars, and thus reaching across traditional categories, thereby designated who counted as Jain. The literary representation also unfolds the continuous intellectual engagement of the Jain piety with the laity, along with the Mughal royalty, which requires to be registered beyond the existing understanding of the religious charisma and the imperial fascination to suggest Jain community's quest for formal power relations with the material culture of the political authorities and vice versa. All accounts of the Jain aesthetics in the Mughal period describe the grand processions being organized in towns in which they passed along with their Jain followers, especially in the region of Gujarat, Malwa, Rajasthan, and also in some towns of Western Uttar Pradesh and Punjab as well. The textual desires of morality had to be achieved via the agencies of others' persona within the community. This embedded religious and social life fixed certain standards for the Jain community to fuse internally, but flexibility always remained in the conduct of the laity. The study of different subsects of the Jain community substantially explains the nature and the compulsions of issues taken up by them. At times, formation of identity and hierarchy within the medieval lay and monastic communities was very much dependent upon temple consecration and pilgrimages. Pilgrimage was not just a religious activity at the instigation of the Jain pontiffs. This vibrant community required religious sessions, temple constructions, idol installation, idol consecrations, scriptures, chaturmas, and philanthropic activities by the piety and the laity bond to establish the notion of community. The vast range of the Jain literary genres raises certain issues, like for whom and for what purpose literary production by the Jains was done. Sectarian and ideological issues involved in the shaping of the community identity and the functioning of the networks of the Jain merchants who patronized them and their participation in the various polities and their role as carriers of the literary and the religious text leads to a whole new world of polemics in the religious domain. Jain inscriptional records are basically religious in nature, either celebrating the occasions like temple consecration or the idol installation. These inscriptions informs us about the status, wealth, and lineages of the Jains along with their respectful acknowledgement and prayers for the longevity of, say for example, Akbar Dhiraj. Here, the reference is to Mughal Emperor Akbar or the Malik rule. The prashastis given in the inscriptions give the details of the donors or the consecrators, their family, their lineage, and the scriber, apart from saluting the ruling king and the ruling dynasty of the region. The Jain inscriptions usually they contain the sense of time by referring to the Samvat era or the Vikram Samvat. They also mention the month, the day, and the date of the consecration as well. The benefactor acharya and the sect that followed by the donor, along with the names of the disciples, were also referred to as the inspiring force behind the event. In some cases, contemporary events like the performance of the pilgrimages or temple renovations having relevance for the Jains and the particular religious occasion were also mentioned. A unique form of Jain literary genre was Vigyapti Patra. The visual literary genre, written in vertical scrolls, is a reflection of the creativity in the literary circuits. Besides being an imaginative spectacle, is a spectacle in the visual production as well. The influx of the Vigyapti Patra from 15th through the 18th centuries should be seen as a part of the Jain literary culture emerging within the larger process of production of the multilingual literature, both in cosmopolitan Sanskrit and the vernaculars. These religious and communitarian letters of invitation of the medieval and the early modern Jain community requires to be translated in the larger circulatory context, symbolic or intellectual, from urban to rural, from center to periphery, and vice versa in South Asia. Vigyapti Pats were the letters written by the Jains to their relatives and friends on the Samvatsari day or the last day of the Pryushan Parv, asking for forgiveness for any offenses committed during the year. Such letters were also sent by the Jain sons as invitation to their preceptors At times, these missives are embellished with miniature paintings or by the poetic or philosophic compositions. The textual narratives, in case of the literate community, was a priority for the Jain aesthetic Sangh, as the Jain Munis emphasized on learning, reading, and writing of the scriptures. Yet this very reason made knowledge a prerogative of a selected minority, keeping it beyond the reach of the common masses. This gap between the high level of Sanskrit knowledge production and the secular lay education by several Jain monks shows a deliberate attempt to control knowledge, the source of respect within the community, a source of respect and power within the community. The Jain scholars felt that the religious scriptures, being sacred, should not be exposed to the public at large, which in turn overshadowed the very purpose and relevance of these scriptures, that is, education. Moreover, the language of these Jain scriptures and the medium of instructions was classical Sanskrit, which again compromised with the secular pursuance of education, making it just the means to explore the metaphysics of religion. The use of the vernacular languages was kept limited, that too with a contemptuous attitude. I give an example of 16th century Tapagach Jain monk Bhanu Chandra, who wrote a Gujarati prose summary of Ban Bhatt's Kadambari with the comment that, I translate this from Gujarati to English, it says, the story is difficult. Therefore, in order that the pupil of low intellect means mand buddhi, may understand, I am summarizing the story in the language of the pupil. Thus, the attitude of treating the vernaculars, that is Lok Bhasha, language of the pupil, of low intellect, mand buddhi, again points to the issue of keeping the knowledge subservient and stagnant. Both language and knowledge were used by various vested interests at different points in time to maintain the intellectual hegemony as well as unequal relations within the society. Sanskrit was still required by the Jain intellectuals to maintain the aura of knowledge around them. However, at the same time, they had to respond to the societal changes as well. Thus, vernaculars could not have been ignored. If Heer Saubhagya Kavya is Sanskrit testimony of the fact of the Mughal royal patronage towards the Jain community, the same text, when read in conjunction with other vernacular sources, it refers to mass-scale conversion to Jainism in northwestern India, particularly Rajasthan. Now, this would not have been possible without vernacularization of the Jain philosophy, making it more explainable to the masses. The vernacular collections like Jain Etihasik Rasmala or the Kavya Sangrah, which explains the processes of conversion and popularity of Jainism, are still not the part of the mainstream Jain sources. Many Jain families in Rajasthan till date, they trace their Rajput genealogy. In Gujarat as well, many Jain families are still pendulating between Jain vis-a-vis Hindu identity. The factional conflict or the quest for separate identity was very much present in the textual discourse of the Jain sect. The polemics within the Jain Gachas themselves were more concentrated on self-criticism about the rituals, texts, and practices and the social organization for reform purpose. The perception about the self in the Jain community were of opinion, guided by public image. The works and the textual performances of these gachas created a perverted image of the fellow gacha in their invective. Thus, the first level of distinction between the self and other was made within the Jain Sangh itself. Dharmasagar, a 16th century Tapagach aesthetic, criticized the Digambars, the Lonkagach, and the Khartargach for splitting away from the legitimate lineages of the Jinas. He aimed to show the prominence of the Tapagach as the legitimate successor of the true lineage of Mahavir's disciple Sudharma. Ramay Sundar, again a 16th century Khartargach Jain ascetic, in his work Shamachari Shatak, narrated a fictitious debate that took place over the ideological concerns between a Khartargach teacher and his rival from Tapagach. This work also targeted the Digambars to establish the unique position of the Khartargach. The survival of the Jain community by maintaining an exclusive identity was possible by maintaining timely reforms. Thus, one finds no singular Jain identity, but layers of Jain identities, as nearly every subsect tried to carve out distinct sectarian identities. Now I am going to refer to three texts to establish literary interface of the Mughal historical circumstances. The first text is Hir Saubhagya Mahakavyam, which is basically a personalized glorification of religious elite Hir Vijay Suri, who facilitated and led his community's engagement with Mughal royalty. The second text is Mantri Karamchand Vanshavali Prabandh by Jaisom, which is basically a Vansh Prabandh or a genealogical text, which, while celebrating a genealogical tradition in highly individualistic glorification of a local elite, Mantri Karamchand Bachawat of Bikaner. The third text is Ardh Kathanak by Banarsi Das, is autobiography of a common Jain merchant written during the heydays of the Mughal rule. In this Hindi text narrative, both the royalty and the piety are on the margins in the life of a lay merchant and only emerges as ruptures at the moments of crisis in the narrative. Here Saubhagya Mahakavya is biography of a 16th century Jain Tapagat Acharya Hir Vijay Suri written by Dev Vimal Gani. This text is also an excellent example of hagiographical literature capable of raising a commoner to the pedestal of God. Tapagat Acharya Hir Vijay Suri was an important producer, distributor, and intermediary of knowledge. He was not merely a sectarian leader of one of the most important gachas of the Shwetambar Jains, but also represented the Jain religious community in the Mughal imperial court. His role in translating the acts of the community into identity formation or acquiring and circulating available knowledge across the religious space of northwestern India shows a constant endeavor to control the influence and literary as well as mundane processes. However, this endeavor would not have been possible without multilinguality. However, when the moment of producing the hagiographical literature in his honor came, the language chosen happened to be classical Sanskrit. This two-edged strategy, or the politics of literary production, requires to be contextualized within the ongoing circle of elite versus popular, classical versus vernacular. This was not an unconscious vertical filtration. Rather, a new horizon of a structural alignment had to be drawn. In the traditional hierarchy of the Mughal period historiographical sources, Bhagyakav's text would typically be relegated to the category of untrustworthy Hindu lore. In contrast, as part of the esteemed tradition of Persian court chronicles, say for example, Aine Akbari, it ranks supreme on the truth scale. Yet, both versions of the Mughal Jain engagements are shaped by the literary elements, whether in their tone or compositional emphasis or the degrees of the poetic figuration. Mantri Karamchand Vanshavali Prabandh was composed by Khartargach ascetic Jai Som Upadhyay at Lahore in 1593 and subsequently a Sanskrit commentary and then a Gujarati translation by his pupil Gun Vijay in 1598 and 1599 common century. This text celebrates the history of an elite Jain family, the Bachawats under the Rajput kingdom of Bikaner. The objective behind the production of this text are multi-layered. Throughout the text, there is a constant engagement with power. The text accepts the sovereignty of the Mughals, not because it being a political bulwark, but to defend the personal interest of the protagonist of the text, the regional political elite, Mantri Karamchand Bachawat of Bikaner, and projects Karamchand in such a fashion that his patron, Raja Rai Singh of Bikaner, and the Mughal emperors, they remain on the margins of the text. The text uses genealogy, legitimacy, and divinity as forms of power of a lay Jain. Being Jain could not be merely a ritualistic process. So being true to the philosophical content of the religion was more significant. Thus, Karamchand Bachawat had to be charitable, pious, as well as large-hearted. Miraculous divinity and genealogy brings legitimacy, which in turn allows the Bachawat family to grow out of the shadow of the Bikaner royalty and have an alternative autonomous identity. However, the moment when one looks beyond the boundaries of this particular text, the tension between the Sanskrit narrative and the vernacular sources like Darpat Vilas and the historical memory of the Rathors of Bikaner are visible because the claims of the Jain Sanskrit narrative were being contested in the popular Rajput discourse. In contrast to the aesthetic and the elite textual lens of establishing self-supremacy, a layman, Banarsidas, began his story by establishing his individual identity, that is, the slave of Jain Tirthankars, Parsh and Suparsh, carrying the name Banarsi, which also identified his birthplace Banaras, the birthplace of the two Tirthankars, Parsh and Suparsh. He also identified his language, that of Madhya Desh. He also identified himself with the lineage of the Shrimal Jains, who claimed conversion from the Rajputs of Biholi, a place near Rohtak. And Banarsi Das once again reiterates, नगर आगरा में बसे जैन धर्म श्रीमाल बनारसी बेहोलिया अध्यासाल. That is, he again identifies himself with the geographical identity of Agra as Jain of Shrimal clan, Banarsi Beholia by name, and an Adhyatmi by conviction. Throughout his history, in spite of experimenting with the ritualistic forms of his religion, Banarsidas never denied his religious faith, that is, his existence as a devout Jain. Throughout the ups and downs of his life, he keeps on deviating from certain prescribed norms of orthodox Jainism, but his sense of being a Jain never betrays him. To analyze medieval Jainism and different sects of Jainism, one can certainly bank upon the strong statement made by Banaras, a lay householder, about his religious identity. Moreover, his sense of belonging to Madhya Desh, that is central part of India, his sense of association with the royalty, which comes out explicitly at the time of passing away of Emperor Akbar or the subsequent coronation of his successor Jahangir, indicates to a sense of security that a common man like Banarsidas had under the Mughals. The selfhood of being a Jain did not curtail his worldly exchanges with others. The generous use of Persian words and Hindu practices indicates this trend of individualism beyond communitarian textualism. It is quite strange that while Hir Saubhagya Mahakavyam treats omnipresence of the Jain pontiffs indispensable both for the royalty and the piety, Banarsidas seems to have had little contact with the renunciants, nor did he seem to feel the need of their presence to live as a good Jain. Rather, he is able to integrate his youthful eroticism with ritualism to disagree with Jain traditions. At the same time, Mantri Karamchand Vanshawali Prabhan treats patronage as the key word for all the meritorious deeds and the religious performances, while Hir Saubhagya Mahakavyam and Mantri Karamchand Vanshawali Prabhan are highly celebrative and optimistic texts. Ardha Kathanak is full of anxieties, delusions, and expectations not to be met with. Thus, these three texts, having linguistic differences as well as literary window to the bipolar world of the elites and commoners, are yet to be explored in the normative historiography. Rather, these trends pushes us to find the comparative meanings of being a Jain in the late 17th century at individual, sectarian, and communitarian levels. These Sanskrit and Hindi texts are in contrast to the Persian court narratives like Ain Akbari of Abul Fazl or Tuzuke Jahangiri of Mughal Emperor Jahangir. Here, the local elites and the common merchants have absolutely no spaces, while the elite Jain pontiffs like Hir Vijay Suri, Jin Chandra Suri, Bhanu Chandra, and Siddhi Chandra, they are the authorities who had to be engaged by the royalty for reciprocal legitimization. Thus, simultaneous uses of the hybrid Sanskrit text and Persian court narratives has to be balanced with Hindi autobiography of Banarsidas to perceive a historical imagination and reconstruct a multi-layered and multipolar Mughal history. The pertinent issue to be raised is why the pertinent issue to be raised is why the very Mughals who were so benevolent in issuing farmans, that is the royal orders for the city, could not accommodate the Persian narratives. Is it the problem of historiography or the governance of the sources? The complex relationship that the Jains had shared with the Mughals explicitly comes out in the Jain narratives, focusing on the interface between the both. The Jain literary works presented an alternative perception of the others, whereby the image of the community was given an alternative reading, sometimes guided and driven by the need to make it more accessible and palpable to the popular imagination. This construction became part and parcel of the Jain identity, competing for space in the ideological spectrum with other communities. This process made the persona of the Jain Munis easily comprehensible to the commoners. Interaction between the Jains and other communities took place at various levels. One was the interaction between the Mughal emperors and the Jain pontiffs, and at the same time the others, with that is the Hindus and the Muslims. Literary perceptions and understanding about the Jains was equally significant to carve out the boundaries of identity. More so when we know that the Pushti Margi Vaishnavism posed a major challenge to Jainism in Gujarat during that particular period. The propaganda of orthodoxy and the constructive interaction with the non-Jain society was a dual action to be performed with equal perfection. Persuasions of an imperial service, networking in the royal court, or the pursuit of business were the activities requiring mingling with the non-gens. This interaction also led to confrontation with such systems of customs and beliefs, which required their own to be defended and regenerated. Here, the larger issue is of revisiting the Mughal sovereignty, which seems to be secondary in face of the primary sovereignty being enjoyed by the Jains both as the local and community leaders. The public posturing of sovereignty was quite significant. I am using the term public posturing as many actions of the Mughals, appreciated with great regards in the Jain narratives, many times did not even get marginal reference in the official Persian records. Thus, one can infer that many gestures or actions that were performed just for the public audience and were not so significant part of the policies of the state to be mentioned in the official Persian narratives. The agencies of the state had to mediate to maintain the social harmony and political stability. The day-to-day social life of the Mughal times, as per the Jain narrative, reflects upon the inclusion of the social and the religious elites into interactive state ceremonies. Though many a times, from the point of view of the polity, these social and political elites would not have been very significant, but the necessity of public posturing to have moral legitimacy would have forced the state to interact with these social and religious elites. The issuance of many of Farmans, that is the royal orders in favor of the Jain community, was certainly a gesture to earn the goodwill of the community at a large scale. The Mughal emperors were careful enough to handle the sensibilities of both the Khartargat and Tapagat sects of the community with equal attention. In the established perceptions, highlighting relations between the Jains and the Mughals, Akbar has been depicted as being liberal towards them, Jahangir being adventurous, and Shah Jahan having a neutral status. It will be worthwhile to explore whether it was just the liberal attitude of Akbar or his understanding of the circumstances and the soil that led him to convocate a broad social base for the Mughal Empire, in which the loyalty of the Rajputs was reflecting the military might of the empire, while the Jains had to take the financial care of the empire, as Jains were businessmen, usually very prosperous. As per my contention framed out of the Jain sources, the Jain community formation and the day-to-day engagements, religious, social, and political, it clearly established that each community in general and the Jain community in particular had sponsored and catered a leadership strong enough to negotiate with the Mughal authorities both at the local and at the imperial level. In bargain for the socio-political cohesiveness and peace for all, the Mughal state had to grant certain degree of autonomy to the community. Thus, the issue is how far the filtration of the state power to the lower stratas of the society should be analyzed as a continuous process of engagement with the socio-religious activities, as it was a better option to over-determine the stability of the Mughal state than the despotic characteristic. The vocabulary used by the Jain narratives in the characterization of the ruling classes is no doubt embedded in the cultural context, but nowhere one finds a sense of hatred. Here, one has to ask that how far identities were not just religious or monolith, rather interaction among individuals of different communities occurred at various levels based on multiple overlapping interests. It is pertinent to ask what types of social and political forces our literary genres mediated. The Jain hagiographical literature provides a glimpse into the history of a religious minority, which, in spite of being economically and socially vibrant, was largely ignored in the Persian chronicles. Jain narratives like Heer Saubhagya Mahakavya most often gives the self-perception of the community as well as the perceptions about the others. The relationship between the renouncers and the laity became part and parcel of the Jain identity, competing for a space in the ideological spectrum along with other religious communities. Such textual pretensions and self-glorification requires wider exposure and has important comparative implications for the histories of community formation amongst the religious communities in early modern South Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Jain. That was a very interesting lecture,
Thank
sort of
you.
thinking through. Yeah, I appreciate that. For those of you who are attendees, we have a few minutes for questions. So I'd encourage you to write questions into the question and answers, or you can put it in the chat box. I think as a host, I'll take my prerogative and just wanted to ask a question. More generally, I think that would be sort of accessible. As think about how the Jain community is relating to the state. And one of the things that we're interested in at FIU is kind of interfaith work as well, trying to kind of connect the community to other faith traditions. Are there any texts that you found written by, Qatar or any of these sort of communities that are trying to connect religious modes of, sort of between either Muslims and Jains or sort of Jains and Hindus, sort of at what points do you feel that there was some sort of interreligious dialogue that period, or was there any that has been recorded?
I'm sorry, Dr. Iqbal, there was some loss of voice. Can you just retrace?
Yeah, so
you are saying that some text that, please.
I think in the Mughal period.
In the Mughal period.
Is there any religious dialogue with Muslims or with Hindus? What I know country making within community in terms of groups, their own sectarian identities. Was there any push towards any sort of interreligious dialogue period?
Yes, I'm sorry the voice is breaking, but I have managed to make the sense of the question. You're asking about some Jain text that talks of the dialogue that ensued between the communities. One of the most brilliant examples that one can come across is Heer Saubhagya Mahakavya. In that particular text, you have cantos 13 and the 14th, where there is a very dense discussion that takes place between the Jain Tapagat Acharya, Heer Vijay Suri, and the secretary of Akbar, Abul Fazl, wherein there is the debate that takes place is on the philosophical grounds of both the religion, Jain and Islam. Because this is something, there is a very deep discussion on the philosophy of both the religions. We don't have that much of time to go much deep into it. But yes, one thing that one can be said about is that what the Jains could not have achieved in the mundane material world, they tried to achieve it in the textual world, wherein the philosophy of the Jain, it dominates over the Islamic philosophy. Fine, this is one part. There is a lot of discussion on both the parts. Then you have at the scale of the vernaculars, you have Raj, Suri, Raj. Fine, there also you have interaction between the Jains and the Muslims. Then there is another 17th century text, Devanand Mahakavyam, where we don't find any direct debate, but the Jain understanding of Christianity. Fine, where a Jain monk, Vijay Dev, he is writing about having his own idea of Jesus and Mary, where he compares them with Ram and Sita.
Okay, that's wonderful. Professor, there is another question for you. The relationship between the Jains and the Pushti Marg tradition.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, one more text. Let me just point it out. Bhanu Chandra Gani Charit. Apart from Veer Saubhagya Kavyam, that's a very important text wherein you have a very engaged relationship between the two Jain monks Bhanu Chandra and Siddhi Chandra with the Mughal emperors Akbar and Jahangir, and there is a lot of cross cultural interaction that way. One can look into that text. As far as the question about the relationship between the Jains and the Pushti Margi tradition, see, the point is we have to understand the nature of the region of Gujarat. If we look at from the times of the medieval to the early modern period, Gujarat happens to be a marketplace for religions. Fine. It was a vortex of many religions were available there for the people to follow. Fine. And people not only follow, they stick to one belief system, but many. Fine. This comes in, one makes a greater in-depth into the traditions and beliefs of this particular region. As far as Pushti Margi tradition is concerned, we know in the 17th century, like in 1638, Pushti Margi Vaishnavism had become too strong within the region of Gujarat, and Jains also had been there since the ancient times. The point is, both of these traditions, whether the Pushti or the Jains, they were Baniya. They were into the world of trade and commerce, and both espoused very strongly to the idea of ahimsa. Still, on the philosophical ground, they both contested, and we have many references. Like in 1635, one Kanaji Parekh, who was a Jain, he built a Jain temple in Porbandar. But after 5 years, he built a Krishna temple in Porbandar. This points out towards the shifting identity within their beliefs. So yes, and the degree of intensity of the tension between the Pushti Margi and the Jain, it comes out very clearly in a very later 18th century text, Mirate Ahmadi, wherein its author Muhammad Ali has shown that both hated each other to the extent that the Maheshwaris, that is the Maheshwaris, who were the followers of who espoused the Brahminical religion, they hated Jains so much that they were ready to be trampled under the foot of a mad elephant rather than coming in contact with the Jains. So, and also we have another text, Chaurasi Vanshani, yeah, Chaurasi Vaishnavani Varta, wherein that Sanskrit, the text shows that the initial converts to Pushti Margi Vaishnavism happen to be Jains only.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Professor Jain. It's been an
It's
honor
my
and a
pleasure.
pleasure to have you, and we hope that we can continue the conversation in the coming academic year.
Oh, certainly. My
Thank you
pleasure.
very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Yeah, I
Thanks a lot.
appreciate it. Now I'll turn it over to Professor Larson. Now we finished the keynote lecture part of our program, and we will turn it over to Professor Larson, who will be turning over and presenting the awards to the honorees for this morning. So I'll turn it over to Professor Larson with the first award, which will be the award for Samaniji Chaitanya.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akhtar, and thank you, Professor Jain, for a very enlightening lecture. Exactly the kind of thing that we love to learn about. It's my pleasure this morning to recognize and grant this award to Samani Chaitanya Pragya, who is a visiting professor of religious studies at FIU and affiliated faculty of the Jain Studies Program. She is a professor in her home institution, Jain Vishva Bharati University of London. She is also the founding director of Bhagwan Mahavira International Research Center, She has organized many national and international conferences on Jain philosophy, both in India and abroad. She has published more than 5 books and more than 35 research papers in various journals. Her research interest includes Jainology and comparative philosophy and religion. She researches primarily on Jainism, secondarily Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, and Western philosophy in its classical, modern, and postmodern thinkers. Within and between these traditions, she focuses on the history of epistemology, ethics, conflict theories, violence, and nonviolence studies. She is interested in the scientific and social innovative studies and research in the field of Jainism and works on various projects related to such studies. She also works on conflict and conflict resolution theories and nonviolence and peace studies. She has offered programs in training in nonviolence and Preksha meditation and has been the advisor of the Preksha Meditation Club at FIU from 2010 to 2013, and then from 2019 onward. We have been honored to have Samaniji at FIU for a second term in the department and have learned much from her about Jainism, and we have all been impressed with the breadth of connections she has been able to make with scholars and thinkers around the world in expanding awareness of the Jain tradition. We honor Samaniji for her hard work and dedication in bringing the ICSJP conference to FIU, as well as connecting the FIU program with the Jain world. She is an invaluable asset to our program, and we look forward to further developing our connections with the world of Jain studies, both in India and beyond. Samaniji, would you like to say a word or two?
Thank you. Yeah, I am saying. Okay, so should I speak?
Yes,
yes, just a word or
Okay.
two, Samaniji. Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much for introducing. I am very much grateful to the chair of Religious Studies of FIU. In this department, I have worked during 2010 to 30, and second time I have got the same opportunity to work in the same department with the same chair, Professor Larsen. It is really very wonderful experience by working at FIU and especially in Religious Studies department, where I'm getting all support for developing my academic knowledge to work in the Western academia. And I have learned so many things from our students of FIU. They are very positive, very receptive, very attentive. And I have seen that each and every student and the staff and the member of administration of FIU all are very positive, receptive, and they are helping and cooperating at every step to promote Jain studies and research at FIU and through FIU in the Western world. So I'm very much grateful that I have got this opportunity, and I would like to express my deep sense of gratitude to my great visionary gurus, spiritual leaders, Acharya Tulsi, late Acharya Tulsi, and late Acharya Mahapragya, and the present Guru, Acharya Mahashaman, who have given this wonderful opportunity to work at FIU. And I have been very much blessed that when I came first time at FIU during 2010 to 30, I found that Professor Larsen was the chairperson, and Professor Katz was the first professor of Jain studies. And I worked with him. Professor Larsen introduced me to Professor Katz and said to him that you should develop some courses with Samaniji, and Professor Steer was also instructed by Professor Larsen for developing some new course especially on violence and non-violence, the concept of violence and non-violence in Eastern traditions, especially in Jain tradition. So that course I taught with Professor Steer and Professor Larsen, and also Professor Katz And that was a really very wonderful experience for me to learn from these old great scholars of FIU. And that is really, and at that time there was also an opportunity of celebrating the birth centenary of Acharya Tulsi, and I thought that I should think of plan for some international conference. And during that time I shared my ideas to Professor Katz, and he was so positive, so cooperative. He at once accepted that proposal and proceeded it to the Professor Larson, and that conference was also organized, though I was not present during the conference time. But that was also very wonderful experience of FIU administration and academicians, and it was really appreciated. This time there was another opportunity before me, that there was birth centenary of Acharya Mahapragya, who was the great visionary, who has modernized Jainism, who has what we say, interpreted Jainism in a new perspective, in global perspective, and also in social and scientific perspective. And I thought that since I'm working here at FIU, this ICSJP conference, which was held before in 2016 in Mumbai, in IIT Bombay. So that got very grand success and very good response from all over the world. I should again repeat the same conference at FIU, and I proposed this conference to Professor Larson, and Professor Larson was really very energetic and very dynamic and very positive chairperson of the department. He at once accepted the proposal and proceeded and did all further activities and got approval from the president of FIU, and I could get this opportunity to organize this conference. And we have found that with the support of the FIU administration and Iqbal, who is the present program director of Jain Studies at FIU, and also all the learned members of BRA of JERF and executive committee of JERF, and also the Jain community and all Jaina and other organizations. They have come forward to help us, to help me to organize this grand event at FIU. And we have seen that almost more than 10,000 participants have attended this conference through Zoom and YouTube from almost 27 countries. So that is really very fascinating for me. And I have seen that the scholars are ready to come to participate in this conference wherever it is organized, whether it is organized in India or abroad or any university or in any organization. So it is really wonderful experience. And my main purpose is to rethink about Jainism, to revisit, to re-articulate according to the global need of the world. So that is the main purpose of organizing this kind of international conference. And I also want to blend the science with spirituality, with philosophy, with religion, so that both the trains of knowledge can work together for the welfare of humanity. So that was the dream of Acharya Mahapragya, and I thought that this dream should be materialized with the help of, with the support of FIU. And I have got the full support of FIU administration, academic people, technological team, and Iqbal, along with JERF members and the Jain community of the USA. So it is a really good experience. And I have found that the students of FIU are also very much good students. They can learn Jainism very deeply. Though when they come in my class, I find that they don't know about the word Jain, what Jain is, or Jainism is. But they start learning the particular, what we say, identity of this particular religion. And they start with ABC and reach to the master level of knowledge of the Jainism in one semester. so many times I say to this experience to people of my Jain community, that you can see that you are following religion from many, many generations, even though might be you have no knowledge about your own philosophy or religion so deeply as the FI students know. So this is really a good experience of the students, and Maya is my student, and she was in 2 courses in last semester, in fall semester, in meditation course, and also in the what we say religion, Asian religion course. And I found that how deep she could go into the philosophical hardcore text of Jainism. I did not refer to that book, but she found that book, and she read that book and presented very well in the class discussion. So really the students are very receptive, and I find that all souls are same, whether they are Hindu, whether are Jain, whether are Buddhist, they are same from within. They are not different from whatever truth is there. They are ready to accept, and especially the Western people, Western mind is very open mind. So that is really very great thing which I'm learning from the West. And that's why sometimes I say that now the Jainism must flourish in the Western academia, because people are very open-minded. They are ready to accept truth. If something is true, if something is logical, if something is scientific, and if something is for the well-being of humanity. So that is my experience. So I'm very much thankful that the administration, especially I'm very thankful to the president of FIU, Professor Mark D. Rosenberg, and the very learned dean of International School, Professor John Stake, and my learned and very loving chairperson, Professor Larson, and my colleague, Dr. Iqbal, and all other my community members, that they are helping me to work here outside of India. And it is all very good experience which I'm getting here. And I look forward the same support, same cooperation, and the same guidance to work more about in the field of Jainism, and also the comparative religion, comparative philosophy, and in the field of science and spirituality. So thank you very much for honoring, for giving this award. And it is really a very great honor on my part and to the whole Jain community. I am getting best compliments from India and from all my scholars who have participated in ICSJP when they have listened to this award, which is being given by FIU and all the academic and administration people. So I'm very much thankful again for bestowing this award. And I would like to work at FIU, because FIU is not separate from our Jain organizations. I feel that it is our second home. We can work here freely without any difficulty, with all support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samanaji, and congratulations again on this very well-deserved recognition. Now with that, it's my pleasure to turn to 2 new awards. You're actually at the inaugural ceremony of these awards. And it's my honor to mention Sapan and Gitika Bafna, who from the very beginning have been actively engaged in establishing Jain professorships at Florida International University and the University of North Texas. Sapan is co-chair of the board of the Jain Education and Research Foundation. Both Sapan and Gitika work in the local community, Sapan at CoreLogic and Gitika at AT&T. They helped envision and develop the Jain Studies Program at FIU from its inception. We're so grateful for their continued help and support of the program. And today, actually, we are awarding these next 2 awards are the Bafna Award have both an undergraduate and a graduate. I'll do the graduate award first. So it's my pleasure to recognize Ashi Jain with the Graduate Research Award in Jain Studies at FIU. I will tell you that in her first year of studying at FIU, she actually served as my teaching assistant. So as I mentioned earlier, I teach a course, Studies in World Religions. There were 50 students in the class. And when she was a fairly new student at FIU, I asked her one day, I was thinking, you know, since I have a Jain TA, I should have her teach the class on Jainism. And she gave a wonderful lecture. I'm sure it was a little bit daunting to stand up in front of 50 undergraduate students and present to them for the first time knowledge about Jainism, but she did a wonderful job and it was filled with insight. I also want to say that it's been a pleasure to watch Ashi travel through our program to make friends with the other graduate students. In a really good program, the students learn as much from each other, their fellow students at the graduate level, as they do from their professors. And Ashi is the kind of person who makes every place where she is a better place. I've seen her impact through her friendships and through her discussions on other students. And so I'm very pleased to award her this outstanding graduate research award. I want to tell you that she is just finishing up now her master's thesis, which is really an extensive research project. I would like Ashi herself to say a few words about her thesis for which she's being recognized and about her future goals. So Ashi, would you say a few words, please?
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Larson, for the introduction. And I feel absolutely honored to receive Sapan and Gitika Bafna Family Endowment Award. Thank you very much. 5 years ago, I could never have actually imagined receiving my higher education, that too in Jain Studies, from one of the renowned universities in the United States. Being born in a Jain family, I have seen my parents, my guardians, advising people about Bhaktamar Stotra, like to recite with full faith for some healing purposes. Could faith be used as an alternative to supersede the abilities of modern medicine? This question actually triggered me when I lost my mother to brain tumor, and later I assisted my guardians in their Bhaktamar clinic. So that thing set me on a quest to investigate the Jain interpretation of faith-based healing through Bhaktamar Stotra. And in between, the journey culminated in a summer school experience at International School for Jain Studies, where I interacted and engaged with Jain scholars and then there I made my decision to pursue my master's in Florida International University. Here at FIU, my research titled Reconciling Illness Through Devotion, the Medicalization of Bhaktamar Stotra in Contemporary Jain Faith Healing Practices. It is an ethnographic investigation of diaspora Jains' attitudes and perspectives towards the hymn and related faith healing practices. So many modern Jains, they theorize the faith healing potential of Bhaktamar Stotra through the language of medical science. In this research, I argue that Jains have understood the Bhaktamar Stotra effectiveness not only recently, but from medieval times to contemporary times as working at the nexus of bhakti and mantra, while contemporary Jains add a new interpretation to its efficacy that I call medicalization. The term implemented in my research, medicalization, explains the scientific understanding and outlook of Bhaktamar Stotra that includes faith healing practices through Bhaktamar rituals and how Jains have implemented this. This research also examines how Jains in the diaspora see the Bhaktamar Stotra as an instrument of healing to negotiate the doctrine of karma, particularly illness, a result of bad actions. I believe my research will help the readers to understand how faith healing exists among believers in modern medicine and science, taking into consideration the overlap and the complexity of the relationship between traditional healing practice and modern science. This research would not be possible without the inspiration and support of so many people from the Jain community, family members, as well as the academia and the Religious Studies Department FIU. I'm very thankful to the Jain Studies Program at FIU that have not only changed me, my life, but my entirety. And for my future goals, I choose to pursue my PhD and in the religious studies at University of Ottawa, and I hope I'll be able to contribute in the field for the Bhaktamra Stotra and its relationship, to bring it like as a first aid treatment, and to highlight like the scientific and the lived experiences of Jains all over the United States and North America, basically. So thank you very much for this award and for this recognition. I really appreciate.
Congratulations, Ashi. And thank you so much for that clear explanation of a very insightful thesis. You can tell that the quality of research at FIU is very high, and we see it in Ashi's thesis. And also congratulations. It's not an easy thing to get accepted into a PhD program these days, and we're really excited for your studies at Ottawa. It will be a great place for you to go. And we wish you all the best in the future. And now I would like to present the Undergraduate Outstanding Research Award to Maya Fiorella. So a long time ago, one of my professors who taught Jewish studies came into our classroom, and he said he traveled around the country, giving lectures on weekends and sometimes at universities, sometimes at synagogues, Jewish communities around the country and around the world. So he came into our class one day after one of these weekend trips, and he said, "You know what the number one question I'm asked when I travel into the community?" So everybody was guessing this, that, and the other thing. And he shook his head each time. And then finally he said, "No, the number one question I'm asked, are there any non-Jews who take your courses?" So of course, maybe the majority of people who research on Judaism are Jews, but do any non-Jews? And I was a non-Jew in the class. So, that was kind of proof that in fact, Jewish studies reach beyond just the community itself. And with the recognition of Maya, you see here at FIU that, and as Samaniji mentioned, we have many non-Jain students, and they don't even know what Jainism is until they come to FIU. And Maya, I will tell you, I had her as a student this year. She took a year of Greek with me. And I want to tell you a little bit of background about this. So Greek and Latin are members of languages that we call the Indo-European language family. And of course, you'll notice the word Indo at the beginning of this because this family of languages includes Sanskrit. And it's one of the largest language families stretching from India and through Iran, right? So Persian is an Indo-European language, Farsi, and then right through Europe. Maya took ancient Greek with me. I teach languages, as Iqbal mentioned, and she also studied Sanskrit. And I think that she is the first undergraduate student. It's incredible for a student just to do one of these languages, but for Maya to have done, thanks to the Jain Studies Program, Maya has studied Sanskrit as well, and also Greek. So this is a great accomplishment. And for this and all her studies and her high achievements, we are pleased to award her the Bafna Outstanding Undergraduate Research Award. And I'd like to invite Maya also to say a few words about herself and her introduction to the study of Jainism at FIU and her future goals. So with that, Maya.
Thank you, Professor Larson, for the welcome. And thank you. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity and to receive this award. So initially, when I started my college career, I guess you could say, I was a philosophy major. And due to personal experience where I felt like a deep sense of spirituality, I felt that I was put on my path to study religion. And so I transferred from the University of New Orleans to FIU, and that's where I discovered Jainism. So thanks to Samani Chaitanya Pragya and former Professor Vos, my interest in Jainism was really sparked. So during my undergraduate studies, I, like Professor Larson said, I studied Sanskrit, Greek. I did some biblical analysis, the study of various ancient and modern magical traditions, mystical experiences in African, Western, and Asian contexts, healing through meditation, especially Preksha, and the philosophical and ethical study of Jainism. Some topics that I've covered in my papers are the conflicting beliefs on meat consumption in Mahayana Buddhism, transcendental meditation, an analysis of the concept of reality in Jainism, the Preksha meditation tradition, specifically Laisya Dhyana, and a case study that followed Jain sentiment towards the religious practice of animal sacrifice. And I want to further my career in religious studies, and I hope to further my research on the survival and the metamorphosis of Shramana traditions and the philosophical and ethical divergence between these movements. Some of my academic goals are to conduct research in India, develop advanced reading competency in Sanskrit, develop reading competency in Prakrit, and eventually earn my PhD in a specified area of religious studies. So thank you.
Wonderful, and congratulations, Maya. We're actually happy. We're hoping to keep you at home and start you in the master's program at FIU in Jain Studies this coming fall. Well, as I have mentioned, these awards are sponsored by the Bafna family, by Sapan and Gitika. And I would like to invite them now to say a few words. We so much appreciate their endowment and their vision for Jain Studies at FIU. And I would like them to speak a few words now. Sapan and Gitika.
Thank you, Professor Larson. Honorable Samniji, Shalinji, Deepakji, Jeff Board of Directors, all attendees and dear students. First of all, sincere thanks for inviting me to speak. And I'm going to speak on behalf of Jain Education and Research Foundation and all of its donors. Some of you already know, and some are experiencing, we sort of growing up in a Jain family, we as Jains are taught the importance of donating very early on. And we are so fortunate to constantly be around role models who are just great example in giving. Many of them are on the call today as well. The fulfillment, some say, is in giving. While that is true for us, it was also in seeing the impact of the same, which we are evidencing today in this ceremony. So thanks again for the same. To very shortly speak on the vision by the donors, right, as to why this program and awards were created. The goal was very simple. How do we contribute towards creation of scholars in Jain studies who sort of are given the opportunity with the best teachers, scholars from India, like Samnijis and many others. We heard from Shalin Ji today, we have heard from Deepak Ji. How do we bring these scholars together and to create the curiosity in the young scholars we are hearing as well, Ashi and Maya, as we heard. So one, that was the goal. How do we enable that? And second was a hope that these scholars get placed in university across US, hopefully Europe, and are able to continue that journey, continue the research. And I can very say from my heart that we feel both of these goals are being achieved. 10 years ago, I remember some of us would sort of debate, what will these scholars do when they have completed their master's program, their PhD? And 10 years later, 11 years later, we are at a point where there are more chairs than scholars who can fill them, who go deep in the Jain studies. So what a turn of event and accomplishment from the vision perspective. This would not be possible without the support from FIU, from the scholars and administration. And we sincerely thank you for your efforts, for the partnership. I think enough is said and will continue to be said with what a worthy and great partner FIU has been for us. I always say for me, I feel I'm equally on FIU side, if I have to say that. Because, studying at FIU, both me and my wife, Gitika, both of us are graduates from FIU, and that is such an honor to carry, being the alumni. I would also like to thank all the donors to the Jain Studies Program for their generosity, for the vision they had to invest in this outstanding future scholars we are seeing. I'm sure the wonderful feeling I'm having, many of us feel that they all will witness the same positive impact. This program is having a great impact on the community in general, which is so heartwarming to see. And finally, again, a big congratulations to Ashi and to Maya. We have high hopes of you and we wish you the best. And to all students and knowledge seekers, we applaud you for your success, for your outstanding education. FIU I hope will be a great alma mater for you as well as you go on in this journey and lead a successful and a purposeful life. So thanks again, and thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Sapan, and we so much appreciate your endowment of these awards. We have just finished our awards ceremony, but we have one other couple that we would like to recognize. So Ashi is on a fellowship that has paid for her tuition at FIU, and it is the Rajiv and Latika Jain Fellowship. So we want to recognize them. They're not able to be here today, but it's very important for us to recognize contributions where contributions have been made. Rajiv and Latika Jain are active philanthropists. They supported professorships at Florida International University and the University of North Texas, as well as establish a perpetual graduate fellowship program in Jain Studies at FIU. Rajiv is the chairman and chief investment officer at GQG Partners, a global investment management company. They have generously supported the studies program at FIU for more than a decade. Those MA students, master's students, generally supported by the endowment and graduated from our program, have gone on to complete doctoral programs in leading universities around the country. For example, Dr. Vinu Mehta completed her doctorate at the University of Florida and is continuing as a postdoctoral fellowship, fellow at the Claremont School of Theology. Dr. Shivani Bothra completed her doctorate at the University of Otago and has a postdoctoral fellowship at Rice University. And of course, Ashi is just finishing her master's with us. We want to thank the Jains for their support over the years in establishing Jain Studies in the United States. And I understand, Sapan, you are going to just say a word or two, standing in their place, and we appreciate your doing this since they couldn't join us.
Yeah, no, sure. I did cover their message as well in my part, but Rajiv is actually, he indicated he's looking forward to meet with Dr. Akhtar and all these scholars. He will absolutely do that. He is very busy lately, as many of us are, in supporting the COVID relief program in India, Nepal, that part of the world. And that's the reason he could not join, but he sends his well wishes. He is very positive about the success and outcomes of the program, and he will continue to be engaged with us. So thanks on his behalf as well.
Thank you so much. Dr. Akhtar, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce Dr. Deepak Jain, whose presence and whose words are always a blessing to us, and he will close out our program. Dr. Akhtar.
Thank you so much, Professor Larson. I appreciate that. So we are very honored to be working and to have a connection with Professor Deepak Jain. So he is the president, the European president and professor of marketing at China Europe International Business School in Shanghai, China. Prior to being named as the president, he served from 2014 to 2017 as the director of the Sapan Graduate Institute of Business Administration at Chulalongkorn University in Thailand. He's also served from 2011 to 2013 as the Dean of INSEAD, International Business School with campuses in France, Singapore, and Abu Dhabi. And before that, he was, of course, the Dean of Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management from 2001 to 2009, and Associate Dean of Academic Affairs from 1996 to 2001. He has, of course, many different achievements, too numerous to go through here. But one of the very important ones was the Sandy Morton Goldman Professor of Entrepreneurial Studies and also the Professorship of Marketing at Kellogg. His academic career began in Tezpur, Assam, in India. He earned a bachelor's degree in mathematics and statistics in 1978 from Gauhati University in Assam. And he's taught for 4 years at the University of Texas at Dallas, where he completed his doctorate in marketing in 1986. He has published more than 70 articles in leading academic journals and has earned the prestigious John D.C. Little Best Paper Award. Among the many distinctions, he's received the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas from the Prime Minister of India, an award that recognizes exceptional leadership contributions of overseas Indians. He has served as the marketing department editor for the Journal of Management Science, editor of Marketing Science, associate editor of the Journal of Business and Economic Statistics. He's also a former member of the editorial board of the Journal of Marketing Research. He has served on numerous boards, including the director of boards of the John Deere Company, Reliance Industries in India, former director at United Airlines, Hartmarks Corporation, People's Energy, Northern Trust Corporation, Global Logistic Properties, and has served as consultant to many firms, including Microsoft, Novartis, American Express, Sony, Nissan, Eli Lilly, and Hyatt. It's been a pleasure and an honor to work with Professor Deepak Jain over the last year in terms of developing the future for Jain studies, not just at FIU, but in the United States and globally. And so I will turn it over to Professor Dr. And President and Dean Deepak Jain to talk about his vision.
Thank you, Iqbal. Thank you to everyone, and particularly my respect to Samani ji. I was listening to the introduction and something came to my mind. It was 1962, month of November. I had just joined school as a kindergarten student. And my father was taking me to the school, and I asked my father, why do we need to go to school? He said, you go to school to learn the 3 R's. It's an English expression called reading, writing, and arithmetic. Those are the 3 R's. You learn how to read, how to write, and how to do arithmetic. I was in the class, and our teacher came and said, November 19th, 1962, she said that the Chinese army have attacked India, and the army has crossed the mountain region of the northeastern part of India, and they are less than 50 kilometers from the school, and the government of India has asked us to vacate the town by 7 p.m. We are trying to reach your parents to take you back home. I remember leaving the town of Tejpur, where I was born, in those days, in order to go somewhere, you had to cross the river Brahmaputra, and there was no bridge. So we had to wait overnight on one side, in the morning take a ferry, then a train, a bus, and it took us 7 days to reach a town called Rohtak, which Dr. Shalin Jain mentioned in his talk. And we were finally able to meet my grandparents, and my grandfather was a professor, was a teacher and a headmaster at Jain High School in Rohtak. This is November 19th, 1962. 55 years later, the same refugee who left Tejpur town was announced in November 2017 to be the European president of China-Europe International Business School. I would have never imagined a refugee of Chinese war would be appointed as the president of the top business school in China. I attribute this honor to being born in a Jain family, raised with Jain values, and the utmost important is education. So today, on behalf of all my colleagues who have helped create the Jain professorship at FIU, this is what I would describe as, and Sapan is there in the audience, Prem Jain was there in the thing, Neptune, a colleague of a professor at FIU and a close friend. I would just say this is our way of giving back for what we have achieved in life. I describe this as our journey from success to significance. And I attribute our success to the core Jain values, Jain principles. And in particular, one person that I would like to pay my respect is the Samnijis, the previous one, because they were the architects to establish this professorship. I just happened to visit people in Florida on a trip from Central America, and they introduced me to Samniji, and I tell you, lots of things happen when the timing is right. But the people who helped us at that time was President Rosenberg, and at that time, Dean Ken Fulton, who is now the provost, and John Stack, and many others at FIU who gave us or opened the doors of their home. FIU to me is not a university, it's a pilgrimage. I cannot thank all the people at FIU for helping us establish the first professorship. And now, as I mentioned in my remarks on the video, we are going to start our next phase of the journey by now creating what I would describe an Institute for Jain Studies. I was very touched with the remarks of both Maya and Ashi in terms of what they have done with as students, and now Ashi in particular going to do a PhD at University of Ottawa. And we would like FIU Institute that we have in mind to be a center of real hardcore Jain studies. Jainism is not just a religion, it's a way of thinking. To me, it can help what we all aspire to make this world full of peace, harmony, and prosperity. And this can be done through very simple 3 words. One is this feeling of inclusiveness, multiple viewpoints. Just imagine when people think of the professorship, starting with Nathan Katz, to Steve Vos, to Iqbal Akhtar, how more inclusive can you be when these people are the heads of the professorship we established? This is Jainism, a sense of inclusiveness, a sense of multiple viewpoints. There is no dogmatism here. And then a sense of non-possessiveness means a sense of detachment, and detachment means attaching to the reality. Recently, Samniji has hosted a very big conference And what I learned from that conference was 3 words: science, soul, and spirituality. Ashi, in her remarks, said that when we were growing up, we were taught these principles of Jainism, but we never learned why this would work. This institute that we have in mind is to answer the question why. Take a scientific approach, a more research approach, and delve into it and think of science, soul, and spirituality means harness the potential inside you and then bringing that potential to the world. Teaching has never been to me a profession. Teaching is something I worship. Going to a classroom is like going to a temple and the students are the deities. And what I learned today is how this institute at FIU can create the future scholars. Our moral responsibility is to build the leaders of the future. And I am very, very grateful again to FIU. I remember recently having a meeting with John Stack and others. I hope days would come when, like today, we can give more awards to good research papers published out of FIU, the new institute we have in mind. And with the help and the blessings of Samniji and all the other leaders and all the donors who have contributed to this, I can rest assure you that the best days of Jain studies at FIU are ahead of us. No challenge ahead of you is greater than the force behind us. With FIU behind us, Eric Larson, I want to tell you, John Stack, Ken Fulton, everyone, what you have done for us in this lifetime, we can never pay back, but the future generations are there to take this light of torch and enlighten the world. Again, thank you for including me. And as I always say, Deepak Jain is always behind FIU and the best days are ahead of us. Let's all work together for one mission, how we can make this world a safer place to live. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepakji. We appreciate those kind comments and also for the vision and helping to guide us to developing the future of Jain studies, not just at FIU, but around the world. So with that, I would like to, again, thank everyone for coming today. Of course, a special thanks to Professor Shalin Jain, who gave a really remarkable talk about a medieval aspect of Jainism, joining us from the University of Delhi, to our awardees, Samniji Chaitanya Pragya, to Ashi Jain, and to Maya Fiorella for their accomplishments and their hard work in developing Jain studies, learning about Jainism, researching, and helping to further the future study of academic study of Jainism. Thank you to Professor Larson, to David Skip, to Pedro Bota, to Jeanette Garcia, to many of the people who support our programming and our work on a daily basis here at FIU as we expand it. Thank you to Sapan, Nirmal, to Neptune, to the entire JERF community, to all of the summonees that have come in the past and also will come in the present. We're just thankful to the community, to scholars, and to the university for connecting us in terms of the research and pushing us towards excellence in our thinking and in our actions. So I wanted to thank you all again for coming. If you're interested in joining us for future programming, please do send us an email at jane@fiu.edu and we'll add you to our mailing list. I look forward to catching up with you guys in terms of the work that you have done. If you have future research projects that you're interested in, please do connect with me. We're developing a conference for the spring as well, just for graduate students to showcase cutting edge research that's being done, not just at FIU, but around the country and the world. So we'll keep updated on that. We also have upcoming lectures. So there's a lot of things that we are planning on doing in terms of expanding Jain studies, and we hope that you can be partners with us. So thank you again for attending, and we wish you the best, and hopefully we will see you soon. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Iqbal, and thanks all for making it happen. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shalin Jain.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
It was a wonderful talk which was given by Professor
Thank you.
Shalin Jain. Yeah, so we will be in touch.
Certainly.
And,
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
you have to work out some of the literary documents for developing interreligious course, as Professor Iqbal is looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Certainly.
you have to support in developing that interreligious course.
Anytime. Certainly, I'll do it. But mine would be
Thank
from the perspective of history.
From
We'll
Jain
certainly do it.
perspective. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Certainly. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thanks to Professor Larson and all attendees and
Thank you.
Professor Deepak
My
Jain.
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.